Okay, hi there. My name is Sam. I'm the co-chair for business at the DGSC for this year, and I am presenting here the DGSC fiscal year budget for 2025. When I say fiscal year, what I mean is the year that begins at the 1st of July and ends at the end of June the following year. So what I'm presenting to you is the money that we intend to spend essentially over the next academic year, but starts in the middle of the summer. I am going to go through each section, and you can obviously ask me questions via email or at the plenary on Friday. I'm going to start here with the assets section. This is money that we already have or intend or expect to have. I will go through each line one by one. If it's too slow for you, you can obviously speed up this video, but I'm going to do this as carefully as I can. The first two lines here, the Special Purposes Fund and the Reserve Fund, is money that the DGSC is required to set aside in case of unexpected expenditures. So we're setting aside a certain percentage here for, like, for example, a capital expenditure, and our reserve fund is in case we run a deficit. We don't intend to do that this year, and I don't plan to do that, but the money is there in case of emergencies. And you can see at the bottom of this budget, I've put here the necessary provisions that explain the need for those reserve funds. Next, we have unspent from previous years. This is our famous surplus that we discussed in the fall. As you can see, for our current fiscal year 24 is the year we're currently in. We had at the beginning of this year, in August, we had $365,000, and that was before we received any student activity fees, which I will go into just a minute. What that means is at the beginning of this current academic year, we had $365,000 that effectively needed to be spent soon, otherwise it was going to be taken away from us. And the plan for spending it was what I presented to you in the fall here, and I've put in the comments here a link to the surplus spending plan for you folks to get a reminder of what we voted on in I think it was October, if I remember rightly. You can see that same number is here again. So what we've got here is the surplus that we had at the beginning of this year. Next fiscal year, we expect to have less of a surplus in our assets because we have already spent some money and we expect to spend more of it. So the numbers here in red are actually good. It means that this current year we spent $173,000, which is a combination both of the current fiscal year spending plan, which is this column, and it's also the money that was set aside under the surplus spending grants, which was agreed to last year in the academic year 22-23. So as you can see, over the years, the money gets spent down. Next fiscal year, we are expecting to spend $118,000, and that is the total of this column here. So it's a lot of transfers, basically. It's not money that we'll be giving individually to students, but again, the details are here if you're interested. We pass it on to different departments, who then in turn disperse it to students. The last section of this assets is here. We have the draw on carryover from previous year. This is a provision in the CUNY regulations on the student activity fee, which allow us to draw on $50,000 of unspent money from previous years. And because we do actually have money that's unspent from the previous year, we can draw on that and put it into our operating revenue for next year, as we did indeed last year for this current year. And I'll explain that next as we go to revenue. So the fact that our assets here are declining is a good sign. It means that we don't have money sitting in the bank. We're getting it out the door and we're getting it spent for the benefit of the student body. So let's go to revenue here. We have the operating revenues. This is the money that we actually can spend, the money of ours that we can spend on student activities. Here we have the enrollment. Now, we don't know what next year's enrollment is going to look like. What we're going to do is assume it's essentially the same. Assume it's the same as this current year, which is 3,069 students. It may be less, it might be more, but that's the best guess we have currently. So each student pays up in the formula here, we have each student pays $40.75 times 2, because they pay it once in the fall and once in the spring. And C15 is the number of students there. So we expect to get about almost exactly $250,000 next year, much as we did this year in student activity fees, and that's money we can spend. Here I've put the carryover I've mentioned. These two numbers are the same. It's drawing on money that was not previously spent in the previous academic year, previous fiscal year, sorry. And then finally we have interest here. Our money is sitting in a Citibank checking account, and it does accrue a small amount of interest. And our presumption is that it will be similar to the amount of money that we got last year. That we got this current year. So that means our total operating revenue is about $303,000. And we'll see how that breaks down in just a minute. We'll take a look briefly at non-operating revenues here. This is money that we don't spend. It's not money that we really have any control over. In a way, it's not real money. And what I mean by that is, when you look here at in-kind contributions, this number, $263,903, is actually a figure provided for audit purposes to CUNY Central, which is a record of what the Graduate Centre estimates the value of the rooms on the 5th floor to be. So if we were, for example, to give these rooms and offices to somebody else for other purposes, this is how much it's estimated they would cost for the year. We also here have transfer from surplus. This is money that we're drawing on from our assets. And it's not technically money we have control over in the sense that we can spend it again. It's already been accounted for. So our non-operating revenue is slightly higher, but that number is not something that should detain us for the minute. So our total revenue is approaching 700K, but as I said, the really important figure is this operating revenue, and I'll show you now how this breaks down. So expenditures, excuse me. Firstly, we have the committee section here. These are line items for money that can be spent by certain committees. The first is the Executive Committee's discretionary fund, and the Executive Committee consists of the 3 co-chairs, as well as the UFS liaison and the USS delegate. And money that they spend here is typically appropriated for things like catering meetings and also merch. So, for example, this year, some of this $5,000 was spent on the merchandise purchasing, or the bags, the stickers, the mugs, all that good stuff. So that's money that is available to spend at their discretion. And ideally it's spent for projects that have not currently got a space elsewhere in the budget, but that will be beneficial to the student body. Same here again for steering. This is our 6 steering officers. It's money that can be spent in a way that they see fit, in a responsible and thoughtful way throughout the year. Probably not all in one go, but possibly if a big enough project was proposed. 3 smaller committees here: Student Services, Wellness, and Outreach. This is, for example, if a particular event was proposed by one of these officers. For example, the wellness money has previously been spent for things like a massage therapist during exam week, that kind of thing. So it's money that people who chair those committees can decide to spend for particular purposes, and hopefully they will get used as they have in the past. Next, student activities. Now this is 3 big categories, as you can see. This is probably the bulk of where our money gets spent in a granular sense for student benefit, and we have chartered organizations. So each of those chartered orgs that we have get $300 per semester to spend, and it can add up from semester to semester. So the money that they are entitled to is listed here. Same for program allocations. This is the money that is available for every program at the Graduate Center according to how many students they have. And it's $200 as a minimum, or $5 per student enrolled in that program, whichever is greater. So this figure is something that's been calculated in advance. It represents every student that's enrolled at every program and the Graduate Center. We can't really budget any less than that, because hypothetically all the programs could intend to spend all their money next year. That hasn't happened this year, but ideally we will get to a place where students really are spending as much of this as we possibly can, because otherwise it goes to waste really, and we have to find another use for it. You'll see here that I went from 20 to 30,000 for grants. I'm increasing the grant awards by 10,000 because this year was a really big success for grants. We had 2 fantastic officers for funding. We had Samantha, who was in the fall, and Caroline, in the spring, and we've granted some really great projects this year. In particular, conferences. Conference season is upon us, and we've funded a lot of great conferences that I hope we can do more of in the future. We're going to reach our $20,000 limit this year, and I would like to raise that limit for next year, because I think that funding conferences is a really good way to spend student activity fees. It's great professional training, and it's just good all round for the culture at the GC and for the student development. So that's where we're going, and we can talk about that, of course, on Friday if you're interested. So, social and community. We have new student orientation. Last year we spent about $1,000. This is the first day of semester when you have the first year students in the C level, hearing talks, filling out paperwork, attending events. There's lots of tabling. I would like to spend a bit more money on that next year, because we didn't really, we had pizza, we had a few things. I think that we could have done more, and that we could do more in the future to really celebrate and welcome students on the 5th floor on that orientation day. Maybe we could get more than pizza. We could get some, better food and more drinks, maybe even some more merchandise, stuff like that. So I'm putting more money on that line for that reason. Parties, again, just the same. Money that we could spend, for example, for a Thanksgiving party or something like a Christmas party, something like that. We did that a little bit this year, and I'm keeping the number the same on the expectation that we might do something of a similar caliber next year. Committee meeting catering. This is previously a budget line called meetings. I'm just making it more explicit here that this is money set aside to cater plenaries and steering meetings. So we do cater those meetings, as you know, and I want to make sure we have money set aside to do a good job of that. So that's just the same as it's always been, but with a new title. Leadership development, $1,000. This wasn't spent by us so far this year. I'm keeping it the same next year, and it's for the development really of the student leaders at the DGSC. Anybody who wants to be involved in, for example, doing an event, doing a retreat, doing a special activity or exercise to do with leadership development, we're keeping it at the same level. So next, contribution and transfers. This is money that we send to the rest of the graduate center for the benefit of the student body, but that we don't spend it personally. And I'll explain what I mean here in some detail. The first is the Childhood Development Center. This is on the 3rd floor, and they have a license to look after 27 children. I think it's between the ages of about 4 and 6 or 7, if I'm right, 7 years old. They're available for both students and staff and faculty. Last year we gave them $10,000. This year we gave them $10,000. Next year, I'm proposing we give them $5,000, because as I put in this comment here, we will also be transferring them another $5,000 under our surplus spending plan. So in fiscal year 25, they will get a total of $10,000. And this is typically for them to spend on things like books and equipment and supplies. They buy simple meals, I think. We did a tour. Cassandra and I did a tour of the CDLC in the fall, and it was a really lovely setup. I was really inspired by them, actually, and so I want to keep supporting them at the same level that we have so far. Next is Student Emergency Fund. This is for unexpected expenses that students have. I spoke to the people who coordinate this fund. We gave them $10,000 last year, this year at least. And we gave them more money in the previous year, and I asked what the balance on that account was, and they told me they had about $14,000. So I am not intending to give them any money next year, on the understanding that they currently aren't in great need of financial support. Now this can change if situations change, and we don't have to keep it at this figure. But I think that as it stands, the money is best spent elsewhere because they have the money that they need. I've put here $5,000 for a initiative which is for the Wellness Center to have trainee personnel. Now, this is a conversation that's really in the beginning. In its beginning, we used to spend a lot of money at the Wellness Center for a nurse practitioner. That doesn't happen anymore. It wasn't being very well used, I believe. This was many, many years ago. But I'm putting here $5,000 for the possibility that a contribution to the Wellness Center could allow for them to increase their personnel capacities and offer more therapy sessions. I'll have more information on this on Friday. It doesn't have to stay this way, but I think this could be a good start for helping them develop their provisions, because I think that what they offer is a really, really valuable service. Next is also another first-time initiative. I'm proposing that we spend $1,000 on what I've put here called Food Services Cash Transfer for Students in Need. The head of IT, Jeff Barnes, has proposed that the Graduate Center student IDs can be used as cards to pay for lunch in the 8th floor cafeteria in the dining commons, and that students who are really in need can go to the food pantry and have cash loaded onto their student ID cards that they can then spend in the cafeteria. So I am proposing here that we put $1,000 aside as a pilot project to be transferred to the necessary department at the GC, and they will make that money available for students who have particular financial needs, particularly in relation to food. Again, we can talk more about that on Friday as we go through. Moving on to services here, this tax preparation is, we have a CPA called Dan who does tax prep for students in the spring semester. I believe he's just wrapped up. I'm recording this on tax day, April 15th. He offers basically a $75 rebate for a tax preparation. We'd like to expand this. We know that we weren't able to give this to everybody who wanted one. So I've basically put here enough for 100 students to get $75 off tax preparation with Dan. And if I hear from him that he can do more than that, if we get more people on board, then I'm happy to talk about increasing that. And maybe the next year's Coach F Business could increase it as well. But it's a good service, it's well liked, and it gets used, so that's good. It was formerly also included legal services, but now the DGSC's legal consultations are covered by the Graduate Center Foundation, which is a non-profit. They're separate to the Graduate Center, and they are now covering the cost of our legal consultations. So we still offer them, but they don't cost us any money, which is great. Next is fitness classes. You may have noticed we do yoga classes on campus and on Zoom. We're going to keep that money consistent. We typically transfer it to OSA, to Student Affairs, and they pay the yoga instructor. So I think that's a good service, and I think we should keep it. Next, we have operations here, our election software. This is eBallot. You may have noticed the brand and the company when you were voting in the current elections. We were able to bargain them down on their 4-year contract, which is really good, actually. So this current year, we had to pay $2,500. For the next 4 years, we have a prorated contract where we only pay $1,600. So that was really nice. I was really happy able to do that. Saved us a bit of money, and it also means we don't have to adjust to a new platform. We can carry on with what we're doing right now. And that, as you can see, some of the expenses that we expect to have in the year after, fiscal year 26, I've put here because we know that we're going to be spending that regardless, and so I've put that there for posterity's sake for next year's CCB. Office supplies and printing. This is, the usual paper, pens, all that good stuff. $1,000. I don't think we may spend $1,000 this year on supplies, but it's good to have, and it is important, particularly paper for the printer in the lounge. It's good to have money for that. We also have the graphic arts on the Z level that print posters and stuff for us. So that I'm keeping that the way that it is. More interestingly, we have here the adjunct project, supplies, events, etc. Now, what I've decided to do is to nearly double the adjunct project's budget here for that, and this is for the following reason. This current academic year, the adjunct project have put on a really great set of events. A couple of them are basically sold out. I went to one and it was like standing room only. And what I want to do is make more money available for the adjunct project to pay speakers to come to campus to give talks, because I think that is really helping to build labor movement. It's helping to build interest in the contract negotiations, build interest in union membership. And I think that it is essentially a good thing all around for students to have better information about their labor conditions on campus, because the vast majority of students at the Graduate Center work at the Graduate Center or for CUNY in some capacity or another. So I'd like to support them, and I think some more money is warranted based on their current record this year. Next, we've got the Advocate, printing costs, events, etc. We budgeted at $11,000 for the Advocate this current year. Not a great deal of it was spent this year, unfortunately, because we only printed one issue out of a maximum of 6. We typically are supposed to print about 6 issues in the year, and because we only printed one this year so far, I'm putting the budget at $8,000. We also don't know exactly what the printing costs will be. If issues are smaller, they'll cost less because they're printed here in-house at Graphic Arts in the Z level of the Graduate Center building. So I'm putting it down a little, but there should still be plenty of wiggle room to get some issues out if and when the time comes to deliver more issues and we get a new editor-in-chief for next year. Web consulting, Avenue Web Media. This is the money that we spent for developing the graduates, the DGSC's new website. You can see it looks a bit like this, and it isn't perfect. It's got still some things to be ironed out, but it is by and large ready to go. And so the invoices, the cost of getting that website up and running will go down greatly, I expect, because the work to be done on it is largely finished. So Avenue Web Media are wrapping up their time with us, and I've put aside just $3,000 so that they can provide some ad hoc, on-the-spot support as we go into the next year. But I anticipate that by the end of this current academic year, the new website will be by and large ready to use, and the old website will be kept in the archives for history and to be reflected on as a piece of history at this as a part of this organization. Next, we have web hosting. This is the cost of basically hosting all our data online. We have Liquid Web. This is the cost of OpenCUNY. And Reclaim Hosting is hosting for the DGSC website. It's unfortunate right now we have two separate servers and working on getting those two situations merged. I think we're going to try to migrate Liquid Web content onto Reclaim Hosting, but that remains to be seen. In any case, I expect the cost to be roughly similar with a possible, say, 3% increase. Not much I can say about that right now. I'd like to spend less, but it's quite labor intensive to do server migration, so that will depend on who is willing and able to get involved in that process. Next, we have the domains, cunydsc.org, stuff like that. I renewed them for 2 future years, so it's prorated at about $225 for all our domains, and they're with GoDaddy. They're paid for by the credit card run by the Office of Student Affairs, Matt Schoengood, which is nice. We don't have to worry about reimbursements. All right, coming to the end here, we have stipends and payroll. Here we've got the stipends for 3 co-chairs. This is 3 times 13,215, which is the minimum for a Grad B position at the Graduate Centre. As Jonathan Hannon has put here in a comment, this might increase if we get a contract with the PSC, but for now we're going to leave that as it is because we just don't know when a contract is coming and when it will be signed. Moving on, we have here the USS and UFS positions. They're 50% of a Grad B at 6607.5. And then next we have our 6 at-large steering officers. Now, as I'm very excited to say, we did vote to approve an increase in them. So you'll see the formula is 6 times, again, 6607.5. So every officer next year will get 50% of a Grad B, not 1/3. So I'm really proud of that. I'm really excited. You know, officers deserve more. They deserve to be paid way more than this even. But at least this goes some way to correcting really the inequity that they had to suffer for many years. And so they'll be getting extra starting next year. The adjunct project, this pays for 3 adjunct project coordinators as we've had this year. I'm hoping we will have it fully staffed. The advocate, this pays for an editor-in-chief and 2 other editors. This is assuming they'll put out 6 issues. I don't know if they will or not. It's up for debate, but we will see. Finally, OpenCUNY. This is a stipend for 1 OpenCUNY coordinator. I've put them at 1 so far. If we believe there's good reason to increase it to 2 or more, then we can have that conversation perhaps later in the year or in the fall. This is just an approval for a draft budget, and it will have to be approved again when the new academic year starts in the fall. So that's where I'm putting it right now, and it can be changed as and when we need to. PR director, we originally had somebody who was working on our Instagram. We decided to zero this out. We're not going to hire we're not intending to hire someone to be a PR director. Instead, really, the consensus is that this is typically the work of somebody who is going to be the officer for outreach. So we're folding that role into the work for the officer for outreach, as indeed perhaps it should have been all along. But it was not necessarily so clear. And also no good candidate really came forward for this PR director this year, unfortunately. College assistant, this is a staff member who is being hired to help typically the co-chair of business, but they can do miscellaneous tasks as well. The college assistant, their role is really to help process reimbursement requests. We get at least 100, possibly up to let's say 300 to 400 reimbursement requests over the course of the year. It's an unbelievably high paperwork load, and so the college assistant is really there to help the co-chair for business get money back in the pockets of students if they have spent something out of pocket. This year we spent for just one semester. Next year I'm proposing to spend it for both semesters, if available, if they want to. It's not required, but the money is there if the co-chair for business needs or wants a college assistant to support administrative work, and that helps everybody because it means the administration runs smoother and allows the co-chair for business to do more work that perhaps is of a less rudimentary level and involves more sort of complex thinking, let's say. Jonathan here has put here that it may have to go up if the DC 37 union contract goes up. We don't know that yet, but if it does, we'll adjust accordingly. So finally, we're coming here to oversight and special expenditures. We don't have any control over this first line item here, which is the CUNY auditing fee. This is the amount of money they charge us to audit our own accounts, which sounds a little bizarre, but there it is. They set the number, and that's what we apparently have to pay. I asked them this year if that was still the case, and they said yes. The next two lines are the surplus spending initiatives. Those are the grants that I told you about. Currently, we're about $15,000 worth of spent for the grants of surplus spending. That was approved last academic year, 22-23. And then also the surplus spending plan for transfers. Again, this is this one. This is this money. That was spent. The total here is $79,000. Again, I've shown you these numbers at the top, but the plan is to spend $118,580, which is the total of this column. And then again, in the year after, it'll be that same amount of money. It'll be that same plan, different amount of money. It's this one here, right there. Moving on, transfers to reserves and special purposes fund. No intended transfers there. We are just going to. We're already at the maximum amount. We've maxed out those accounts. We don't need to draw on them or add to them. It's pretty simple that way. And then finally here, that audit requirement, the space and staff at the Graduate Center, $263,000 for really using the space on the 5th floor, and that is what they tell us we need to put. So, rounding this off now, the operational expenditure is about $304,000. That's the money that we actually get to spend. Add it to our non-operational expenditure, and you have a total here at just under $670,000. I have a little thing here to ask, is it balanced? Basically, revenues minus expenditure, and indeed the answer is yes, because the difference is $0.00. So the budget is balanced. I'm proposing it here. And if you have any questions about it, please do email me, or you can also come to the plenary on Friday. If you're a rep, please do definitely come on Friday. We need to vote to approve this. We'll put it first on the agenda so that anybody who has to run out the door in the middle of the meeting, you can do that. But please do come, please do vote, and we can get this squared away. Don't be shy to ask questions. Maybe if you think that it's like a dumb question, you've never queried a budget before. I'd never worked on a budget before when I first started this job. So no dumb questions really. This is actually a new format. For those who are curious, is a new format for our budget. This is what our previous budget looked like. It was quite complex. It wasn't very laid out in the clearest way. So I've compressed a couple of categories. Nothing has been lost, really, but it's a little easier to read. And my intention was to make it more accessible, really, for students who are coming to budgets and weren't necessarily so familiar. And so this is just my intention, my plan to make it more readable, really, for students. So there's a bit of explanations here about some of the aspects of the budget. And that is it. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on Friday. All right, thank you.